Every day, the first sign of them was subtle, a flicker in the corner of the eye, shadows that didn't match the shapes of trees or buildings. At first, people thought it was a trick of light, a reflection from the sun on wet pavement, or their imagination. But then came the power outages, ever the static on communication devices, and the strange whispers that seemed to hum through the air, just below the threshold of hearing. Dr. Elara Myles, and an exo-biologist with a reputation for chasing fringe science, had been tracking unusual energy readings across the globe for months. When the reports of disappearing livestock and sudden blackouts in remote towns reached her, she knew it wasn't coincidence. The patterns were too deliberate, too synchronized. Something intelligent was moving through the shadows of Earth. She arrived in Hollow Creek, a sleepy town in the Pacific Northwest, where the forest swallowed the roads like a hungry beast. The locals were tight-lipped and wary. Speaking of creatures in the dark, and whispers that call your name. Elara smiled politely and made notes, but she felt it herself the moment night fell. A cold stillness gripped the forest, and every shadow seemed to stretch unnaturally, as if it were alive. Her equipment hummed and beeped. Energy spikes pulsed along the tree line, like a heartbeat in sync with something vast, something unseen. Then she saw it every day, a figure slipping silently between the trees. It was tall, impossibly thin, and moved without sound. Its eyes, or what she assumed were eyes, glimmered faintly, reflecting the moonlight like liquid metal. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else, something that had come from far beyond the stars. The creature didn't attack. It merely watched, and then it vanished, folding into the shadows as if they were part of its body. Over the next week, more sightings emerged. Shadows moved against the laws of physics, creeping along walls and ceilings, pausing to observe humans before melting into darkness again. People whispered of lost time, of waking in unfamiliar places, and of seeing fleeting images of strange, angular figures before blacking out. Elara documented everything, her skepticism melting under the weight of evidence. These were not hallucinations. They were visitors, and they were studying humans with a patience that was almost alienly kind. But not all encounters were peaceful. Everyday farmers found their animals mutilated with precision that no predator could achieve. Townsfolk reported broken electronic devices, appliances that burned out the moment a shadow passed, and then came the disappearances. People vanished in the night, leaving only faint, unnatural silhouettes scorched into the ground. Every day, Elara's research led her to a startling conclusion. These beings were not merely observing, they were reshaping Earth, testing its boundaries, preparing it for something beyond human comprehension. But why the shadows? Why remain unseen? She hypothesized that the aliens existed in a different phase of reality, slipping between dimensions, only occasionally intersecting with ours. Every day, the shadows were their footprints, subtle distortions in our reality. One night, Elara set up her equipment in the abandoned mill at the edge of town, the epicenter of recent sightings. The wind howled through broken windows, carrying the scent of wet pine and decaying leaves. Her cameras and scanners hummed, calibrated to detect anomalies in light and gravitational fields. She waited, heart pounding. Then they came. The shadows moved like liquid smoke across the walls. Shapes emerged, humanoid but distorted, limbs bending at impossible angles. A low, resonant hum filled the room, vibrating through her bones. Her instruments went wild, recording fluctuations that defied known physics. She felt herself pulled, not physically, but in perception, as if her consciousness were being nudged, probed, measured. And then she understood. The aliens weren't hostile in the traditional sense. They weren't predators, they were explorers, observers. They were mapping human consciousness, learning the limits of fear, curiosity, and trust. But their methods were invasive by human standards every day, and the shadows they left behind were terrifying because they reminded people of their own vulnerability. In a moment of courage, Elara stepped into the center of the room, raising her hands. The shadows hesitated. Then, one by one, they converged around her, forming a vortex of blackness and faint silver light. She didn't feel fear. She felt awareness. The room pulsed with alien intelligence, and she could sense a question forming in the silent void. Will you understand us? Elara spoke aloud, trembling. We want to learn too. We want to understand. The shadows shimmered. The hum softened. And then, Just as suddenly as they appeared, they dissolved, slipping into the corners of the room and out into the night. Hollow Creek returned to its uneasy quiet. Power returned, animals stopped disappearing, and the whispers faded. But the memory lingered etched in Elara's mind. She knew they were still out there, moving through shadows, waiting for humanity to reach a level of understanding. And she also knew one terrifying truth. The alien shadows weren't here to conquer Earth. They were here to teach it in ways humans weren't ready to fully comprehend. Some nights, when the wind rustled through the trees, she swore she could see them again. Watching patient and eternal. The shadows of the universe had arrived, and Earth had only just noticed.